vengono a prova norme che vi giova nello stesso locale alternar nuovi aspetti ai consueti. Il nido nuzial dov'è? Qui o là, secondo. Anch'esso a doppio fondo la sala, ecco, all'aperto. Un fianco scorre. Capisco, un altro scivola e la dimora frivola. Sale come una torre da terra fino al tetto. È una casa soffietto. Questa è la cameriera che della vostra sposa fugge a serva amorosa. Il cuoco, il servitor son confusi del grande onore. I nomi mi snuvola leggera, raggio di sol nascente esalano mi.
Sorride vostro onore, riso pronto fiori di Sassavio, Madama, de cruci la trama, smaglia il sorriso. Disse il savio, Madama, de cruci la trama, smaglia il sorriso.
A chiacchiere costei mi pare cosmopolita, che guardi se non giunge ancora la sposa. Tutto è pronto, ogni cosa, gran bella di senzare. Qui verran l'ufficiale del registro, i parenti, il vostro console, la fidanzata. Qui si firma l'atto e il matrimonio è fatto. E son molti parenti, la suocera, la nonna, lo zio Bonzo, che non ci tegnerà in sua presenza. E cugine, le cugine, mettiam fra gli ascendenti e di collaterali un 2 dozzine. Quanto alla discendenza provvederanno assai, vostra grazia la bella butterfly. Gran perla di senzare, una e arrampicato, poi ciappica. Il buon salsale, quei ciottoli mi hanno sfiaccato. Ben arrivato, presto d'oro, qualche ristato, alto, la bella. Nagasaki, il mare, il porto. È una casetta Ti obbedisce a bacchetta nostra, la comperai per 999 anni. Con facoltà ogni mese di rescindere i patti. Sono in questo paese elastici del parlato e contratti, e l'uomo esperto ne profitta. Certo! Whisky. Per 999 anni salvo a prosciogliermi ogni mese. È un facile Vangelo. Una ghirlanda di fiori freschi, una stella dai raggi d'oro, e per nulla so 100 yen, se vostra grazia mi comanda, c'è non assortimento. Va, conduci la gara! Quale smania mi prende? Sareste addirittura cotto. Non so, dipende dal grado di cottura. Amore o grillo dir non saprei, certo costei, ma con l'ingenuo e ardi investato, lieve qual tenue vetro soffiato, alla statura, al portamento, sembra figura da paravento, ma dal suo lucino fondo di lacca, come con subito modo si stacca, qual farfalletta palazza e posa, con tal grazietta silenziosa, che di rincorrerla forar mazzare, se pure infrangerne dovessi l'altro il consolato se venne a visitar, io nulla vidi in mano di parlar, di sua voce il mistero l'anima mi colpì, certo quando è sincer l'amor parla così, sarebbe gran peccato le lievi ali strappar e desolar, forse un credulo cor console mio garbato, guidatevi si sa gran peccato famiglia lontana e al giorno in cui mi sposerò con vere nozze ad una vera sposa americana. Ecco, son giunte a sommo del pendio, già del femmineo sciame qua di vento in fogliame, so del brusio.
Nessuno si confessa mai nato in povertà, non c'è vagabondo che a sentirlo non sia di gran prosapia, e pur con opilla ripizza o il termine rovescia le querce più robuste. E abbiam fatto una ghiscia per sostentarci, vero, non lo nascondo, né m'adonto. Ridete, perché cose del mondo.
Con quel fare di bambola, quando parla mi infiamma. E ci avete sorelle?
Non, signore, ho la mamma,
Una nobile dama.
ma senza far di torto, dirà molto anch'essa.
E vostro padre?
Morto.
Quant'anni avete?
Indovinate.
10,
Crescete.
20,
Calate. 15 sono vecchia di già.
15 anni. 15 anni. L'età dei giochi e confetti. L'imperial commissario, ufficiale del registro, i congiunti. Fate presto. Che burletta la sfilata della nuova parentela, molte prestito mesata, certo dietro a quella vela di ventaglia pavolazzo la mia foce la ticela, e col mondo da strapazzo e la zia briaca pazzo. casetta.
Signor Pinkerton, perdono. Io vorrei pochi oggetti da donna.
Dove sono?
Qui, mi dispiace.
Oh, perché mai, mia bella butterfly?
Fazzoletti, la pipa, una cintura, un piccolo fermaglio, uno specchio, un ventaglio,
Quel barattolo,
un vaso di tintura.
oibò,
Mi spiace. Via.
e quello,
Cosa sacra è mia?
e non si può vedere.
C'è troppa gente. Perdonate.
È un presente del Mikado a suo padre, con l'invito, e suo padre ha obbedito.
Gatto che
Quei pupazzi, avete detto,
son l'anime degli
ah, il mio rispetto.
Ieri son salita tutta sola in segreto alla missione, con la nuova mia vita possa adottare nuova religione. Lo zio Bonzo non sa, né i miei lo sanno. Io seguo il mio desiderio e piena d'umiltà al Dio del signor Pinkerton inchino. Il mio destino è la stessa chiesetta in ginocchio con voi pregherò lo stesso Dio. E per farmi contento potrò forse obbligare la gente
Tutti zitti. È concesso al nominato Benjamin Franklin Pinkerton, luogotenente nella cannoniera Lincoln, marina degli Stati Uniti, America del Nord, ed alla damigella Butterfly del quartiere d'Omura Nagasaki, d'unirsi in
matrimonio per dritto il primo della propria volontà ed ella per consenso dei parenti qui testimonia l'atto
lo sposo poi la sposa e tutto è fatto.
Auguri molti, i miei ringraziamenti. Il signor console scende, l'accompagno. Ci vedremo domani, a meraviglia. Posterità, vi proverò. Giudizio. Ed eccoci in famiglia. Sbrighiamoci al più presto, in modo onesto. Ip, ip. Beviamo i novissimi legami. Beviamo i novissimi legami. Antonina Viale.
Intorno al guasta festetti ci levano intorno le persone moleste.
Ecco fatto la missione. Rispondi che hai fatto. Come? Hanno l'occhi asciutti, fa dunque questi frutti, c'hai negato a tutti. Rinegato vi dica, e colpa antica, come sarò da fica, all'anima tua guasta, questo pizzo dovrà sta. Ehi dico basta, basta, venite tutti, andiamo, c'ha rinnegato noi. Sbarazzata all'istante, in casa mia niente mancano e niente panzeria.
non valgono il pianto di quegli occhi cari e belli.
Davvero non piango più e quasi del ripudio non mi duole per le vostre parole che mi suonan così dolci nel cor.
Che fai, Laman?
M'han detto che laggiù fra la gente costumato e questo il segno del maggior rispetto. No, mi sorrondo se quei cavi, zaghirizza no, mi sorrondo se quei cavi.
Ti brontola lassù
E Suzuki che fa la sua preghiera seral.
viene la sera
E l'ombra e la quiete
e sei qui sola
sola e rinnegata,
a voi chiudete
sì, sì, noi tutti soli e fuori il mondo.
e il bonzo furibondo
Suzuki, le mie veste. Quest'obi pomposa di sciogliermi tarda.
con moti di scoiattolo in odio lente scioglie nel far che quel giubbotto è mia moglie
Tra voi sommessi sorride
ma dal
il cuore.
grazia di spiego
Mio
bella di Giglio, mi piace la treccia tua bruna, tra candidi imperi.
Somiglio la dea della luna, la piccola dea della luna che scende la notte dal ponte del cielo
e affascina i cuori
e mi prende e mi bacia lo bianco mantello e versa e rega negli alti riani.
ma intanto finor non m'hai detto, ancor non m'hai detto che m'ami. Le sa quella dea le parole che appaga gli ardenti desideri.
Così vive non
Alta paura, la morna l'uccide, manda vita e sorride per gioie celestiali. Come ora fa nei tuoi lunghi occhi ovali.
adesso voi siete per me l'occhio fermamento e mi piace stata prova che vi ho veduto. Siete forte, ridete
più. Io t'ho ghermita di serra palpitante, sei mia.
Sì,
Butterfly has placed her love and her entire life in the hands of her American husband, the Lieutenant Benjamin Franklin Pinkerton. That was Act One of Puccini's Madama Butterfly, coming to you live from the stage of the Metropolitan Opera House, starring Ermanella Yaho, Roberto Aronica, and Roberto Frontali. Marco Armiliato is our conductor.
Just so beautiful. The perfumed tenderness of the music at the end of that act, so atmospheric. And I must say, Ermanela Yaho's sound has such delicacy. Her portrayal is compelling in the way in which it's so intimate and so delicately crystalline, really, in her sound.
Yeah, she's a very petite woman, and she kind of looks like a 15-year-old girl as well. And this production, I'd forgotten this love scene, these black lacquered floors and the lanterns that are all manned by the puppeteers and the rose petals falling.
So ravishing.
Oh, it's just beautiful. I'm Mary Jo Heath, commentator Ira Siff is here with me. We've got something special for this intermission. Our wonderful Met broadcast ambassador, Deborah Voigt, is going to host a singers' roundtable. Our panel is 3 singers who will be starring in our new production of Mozart's Così fan tutte: Ben Bliss, Serena Malfi, and Adam Plaketka. That's the Toll Brothers Metropolitan Opera Singers Roundtable, which is coming up in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
You're listening to Opera on 3 on BBC Radio 3. We'll leave New York there for a minute or two while they enjoy an ad break, but we'll rejoin in time for the Opera Singers Roundtable that Mary Jo mentioned. There are 2 intervals tonight, the second of which includes backstage interviews with tonight's singers. Unfortunately, no Met quiz this evening. I know, it's a pity, but it will be back later in the season, and it's well worth submitting a question, as if yours is chosen, then you'll earn yourself a gift package of opera recordings and publications. So here's a reminder of the address to write to. Metropolitan Opera Quiz. Metropolitan Opera, 30 Lincoln Center Plaza, New York, New York, 10023 in the United States of America. That address again, Metropolitan Opera Quiz, Metropolitan Opera, 30 Lincoln Center Plaza, New York, New York, 10023, USA. And please do remember to mention that you hear the broadcasts on BBC Radio 3. Or you can, if it's easier, submit questions online. Details are on the opera pages of the Radio 3 website, and from there you can also find links to the Met's own website, where there are further details about the operas, including synopses and casting information. Actually, I just Googled Met Opera Quiz, and it takes you right there. And it's also the place to go if you'd like to get a free copy of the 2017-18 Met Broadcast Guide. The guide contains photographs of the productions and a brief introduction to each of the operas being broadcast. Now, so you can plan your evening, the first part of Act 2 of Madama Butterfly is due to begin at about 8 o'clock, and then after the second interval, which will be at 10 to 9, the conclusion of Act 2 should start at about 9:15. Right, it's time to rejoin the Met now for one of their regular features, A Met Memory.
And now, a Met Memory with soprano Deborah Voigt.
I think one of my most memorable experiences would be the run of Tristan and Isolde performances, where basically the stage involved a revolving door of tenors, one after another.
In March 2008, Voigt sang her first Isoldes at the Met with no fewer than 4 Tristans.
First we lost Ben Heppner because of illness.
And John McMaster took over. Then Gary Lehman stepped in, but his run was rather eventful.
I was sitting in my dressing room, and suddenly in the middle of the third act, there was applause where there shouldn't have been applause. And I came running out and thought, well, what's going on now? Well, the tenor had slid into the prompter's box. Fortunately, he was okay.
Next came Robert Dean Smith, who starred opposite Voigt in the live and HD transmission of the opera. And then on March 28th,
the last performance, finally the stars all aligned and Mercury was in line with Venus or something like that, and Ben Heppner returned, and I think it was probably one of the most exciting performances that I've ever had on stage at the Met. We'd been looking forward to doing these performances together, and so when we finally saw each other on stage, I think it was just a surge of energy. And because it was the last performance, it was sort of like, well, we don't have another one we have to save up for, so let's just leave it all here on stage at the Met. And it was just a really, really exciting evening, and I think we were both really, really relieved that at least we had one performance together.
soprano Deborah Voigt, looking back on a remarkable run of Wagner's Tristan und Isolde in 2008. Voigt has since added the role of Met Broadcast Ambassador to her repertoire. Bringing you this Met memory, I'm John Bischoff.
We are live at the Metropolitan Opera, and it's time for our Singers Roundtable. Are you ready down there in List Hall? I am delighted to introduce our moderator today, our beloved broadcast ambassador, soprano Deborah Voigt.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to be back on the radio and to be speaking with these three fine singers who are sitting here with me. They're going to be starring in the Met's new production of Mozart's Così fan tutte, which opens on March 15th. Please help me welcome this wonderfully international group. Italian mezzo-soprano Serena Malfi, American tenor Ben Bliss, and Czech bass baritone Adam Plaqueta. All right, so let's start with a question that we received from one of our listeners, Diana Batho-Clark of Chatham, New Jersey, who tunes into WQXR. Diana wants to know which type of character you have more fun playing, nice or naughty? Oh, now you don't have to think about it that long. Surely you know.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that my Ferrando in Così is one of my favorites because he's kind of both, you know? I have a couple of arias that are very loving and poetic and dramatically sort of fully fleshed out. But at the same time, I'm playing a really pretty awful, despicable trick on someone who, in theory, I love. So, as I learned from a great director one time, if the question is ever good or bad, black or white, it's never one or the other. It's usually both.
That's probably true. Serena, naughty or nice?
I have to say that I always sing very funny roles because I sing mostly Rossini and Mozart, so Cherubino, Rosina, and they're very funny. And I don't know about the nasty one. Maybe, no, I don't have.
I always have eventually.
Yeah, I will have eventually, maybe.
That's for
Yes.
sure. Adam, how about you?
I try to keep some variety in my calendar because I enjoy both, and I think it's nice not to be stuck in one box all the time.
Well, our listener also wants to know if there's any difference in the way you sing a hero or a heroine versus a villain.
You know, I can't think if I've ever played a villain. I don't think there are that many, like, lyric tenor villains. You're always kind of more...
Well, they are, you just don't notice.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
We're talking on stage, Adam, not in the
Oh, sorry.
No, but I don't know. If anyone's out there listening who knows of a good villainous role for somebody like me, holler. Let me know. That sounds like fun.
Adam, how about you?
I think, technically speaking, it should be sung the same way. Obviously, the interpretation will be slightly different.
Well, Ben and Adam, your characters in Così fan tutte are not classic villains, but they do play a terrible hoax on their sweethearts in order to test the premise that, wait for it, women are completely incapable of fidelity. Yeah. How do you, as modern men in today's world, wrap your heads around this?
Well, I think, for one, it speaks to the sort of eternal humanity and brilliance of Mozart, and not only his music, but the drama he chooses to set and the way in which he sets it, because this is actually my third production of Così in recent memory, and every one has involved some sort of conversation about how you view the plot of Così through the lens of modern politics and human rights, and of course all the things we see in the news, the Me Too movement and everything like that, and how you handle a plot that indelicately shown can really be, kind of offensive. And so it's really interesting to approach in that way, I guess.
Adam, how do you feel
I think
about
that Mozart and Da Ponte make it so obvious that they take it over the top and show to the society of those times that they're actually making fun of it to an extent, even though the standards were really different, that I think it can be a modern piece and it's easy to approach because there's my favorite line is probably in the last recit when Ben says, but maybe there are some pure women for good guys like us. And I always think, well, good guys like us who just deceive our best friend's fiance to win a bet. So it's...
And at the same time, when I'm describing this opera to friends of mine that aren't, opera goers usually and might not be familiar with the plot, the elevator pitch I usually use is it's kind of like a Mozart composed episode of I Love Lucy, with the two couples running around in disguises, playing tricks on each other, and this and that. And what's great is no matter when it's set or how it's done, the thing that it revolves around is the humanity of these four people, and that's what keeps it fresh and relevant.
And Serena, how do you feel about what the men do to you and your sister?
Well, I have to say, Dorabella is the crazy sister. So she's the sister who fell
pretty quickly
first.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I feel pretty bad at the beginning of the opera, but I have to say that from the second act, whatever. Boys, come to me.
Let's talk about singing Mozart. I know he's been a bread and butter composer for all three of you, and people often talk about his music as being good for the voice. Young singers are encouraged to study it. Veterans sometimes say it's like a balm. I myself spent 4 months on a Greyhound bus touring the United States as Donna Anna, so I've been there too and experienced that balm. Do you think that Mozart deserves that reputation?
I think it makes you keep as much lightness in your voice as possible, because otherwise you can't sing it. Mm-hmm. However, the older I'm now getting, I think I'm sort of expanding slightly towards bel canto, and bel canto has good effect on Mozart because it makes you bring more phrase and more legato into the Mozart phrase, which actually could be kind of chopped up if you are not careful enough.
Yeah, it's not so easy to sing Mozart. I think
No.
it's really, really hard because it's so instrumental. And when sometimes to young singers have to sing Mozart for the first time, for the first things that they have to sing, I think it's really, really hard.
It's extremely difficult.
My God.
The flexibility that's required. Mm-hmm. Ben, you have anything to add to that?
Oh man, I do sing a lot of Mozart, and I love it, and I think it happens to be something that suits my voice well, which I'm really happy about. Again, in speaking to non-operatic friends, and I think even to opera lovers, we all kind of know that aside from the drama and the beauty of the music and everything like that, there is an element that opera has that attracts us all that we don't talk about very often, and I call it like the freak show factor, you know, where, you know, if you're listening to Puccini or something, or Wagner, or all the composers do it in their own way, where you just go, what? How are they doing that? Mm-hmm. That's insane. How can you sing that loud, that high, that long, this and that? And the brilliance of Mozart to me is like an onion. There's just layer after layer after layer of compositional complexity and simplicity at the same time, and beauty and drama and everything like that. And the way he writes for the voice is just ridiculous, because it does have that freak show factor, but in like a more nuanced, refined way, where it's not just like, wow, that's a really high, loud note. The beauty is something that you sort of notice after a while, after it's passed by, and it's like, God, that was amazing. How did they do that? Which I love. I love Mozart.
Well, here's something from Barbara Greenstein of Scarborough, Maine, who listens to us on Maine Public Radio Classical. She wants to hear stories about things going wrong on stage. For instance, she remembers a performance of Wagner's Die Walküre in which Siegmund's sword went flying out of the tree into the orchestra pit. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but the poor tenor had to kind of improvise his actions after that. Can you tell us about any experience, unexpected, something happening on the stage in the middle of a performance, and how did you recover from it?
Ooh. Well, my sort of major role debut at the Met was in an early Mozart opera called Die Entführung aus dem Serail, the abduction from the Seraglio, and maybe some of you saw it, I don't know. Before that, I had done a small role for my debut in Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg, which is a whole different thing. It's 6 hours long. I played about 3.5 hours of poker backstage every night. It was great. But in my debut as the character Belmonte, my big aria that I've been looking forward to singing on the Met stage for a long time, called Ich baue Gans, I sit down on the prompter's box during the sort of quiet refrain to sing the lyrical passages one more time through. And in the staging for this, I was supposed to take off a locket that was around my neck and sing to it lovingly, as Mozart tenors are wont to do. But I hadn't practiced it with the wig before, which was pretty big. And so I'm in the middle of this really fluid passage, and I start to slide this thing over my head, and it gets stuck in the ponytail. And there's really not much you can do, because at that point you can't just let go, because you're gonna have a locket hanging out of your wig. So, I mean, I guess all you can do is just try and take a deep breath and just calmly keep going. So I just sang most of it looking down into the pit while I untangled this thing from my head, and I think I looked up just in time for the high note at the end. So.
Did you ever get it out of your ponytail?
Eventually, yeah, but that's not how I imagined my major role debut going at the Met, with fiddling with my wig the whole time. But you'll live and learn.
Serena, has anything ever happened to you?
Yeah.
Sounds like quite a few things.
Once, I accidentally threw into the orchestra a huge plate made of metal during my aria. Because I was on a balcony, I had to throw it, but it just went into the orchestra. Fortunately, I didn't kill anybody. And my face was like, oh my God, what did I do? But I saw that the conductor said, okay, go on. And okay.
The show must go on, no matter what.
You owe me a new harp, but keep singing.
Yeah, right. You have many performances to make up the cost of the damage that you caused. Adam, how about you?
I did the first time I did Figaro in Vienna. The scene in the second finale when I run on is after a moment where the Count goes around and locks all the 4 doors so the Cherubino can't escape. And nobody in the whole production knew that they were actually working locks. Oh. And so I turned up for Signori di Fuori, and I just tried to open the door and it was shut. So I had to run around the whole set and just climb through a wall so that I can even go on, because nobody knew what was happening.
And have enough breath to sing the moment you got there. Well, the three of you seem like you get along very well. And I know you come from very different backgrounds, Italian, American, Czech. Have you talked about the paths that brought you to your opera careers? Are there any interesting similarities or differences?
Good question. I guess we haven't really talked about that amongst the three of us. I went to film school in Chapman University, a small school called Chapman University. Actually, Debbie was briefly a student at Chapman University, and I did music sort of on the side, and they always need tenors, so I kind of got roped into doing my first couple of opera performances, which it turns out I really liked. Then I moved up to LA and worked in production on the Dr. Phil show for 3 years, which was...
That's random.
Yeah, it was pretty weird, man. I got some stories, let me tell you. But anyway, after 3 years, I was like, yeah, I think I'm good. So I called my voice teacher from college and kind of got that up and running again, and have had a pretty good run since then.
So primarily American trained?
Yes, indeed.
Serena?
I don't know, I wanted to be a lawyer. So opera came when I was 19, 18 years old.
When you decided you want to make less money.
Yeah.
You deal with fewer murderers, though.
When I was a teenager, when I was 17, 16, I had a band and I sang funky and, the disco music. Yeah. It was fun.
Do you still have the occasional karaoke night where you go out?
Oh, no, I cannot anymore.
No?
I feel so strange to change repertoire.
Probably wise not to, I would imagine. How about you, Adam?
I went to a children's choir in Prague, and my best friend at the time was studying at the conservatory, French horn, and I stupidly just wanted to be at the same school with him. And since I didn't play anything, I just tried the exams for voice, and they took me on, which I found a lot later as the last one, because I knew nothing, but the voice was okay and I had no bad habits, so they just figured they would try it.
Well, that was Three very interesting ways of entering into the world of opera. Now, we have just a couple more minutes, but here's a fun question from a listener. Greg Nieto of La Haska, Pennsylvania, sent this one to us. Have you ever wished that a composer had given your character a melody or aria that's being sung by someone else in the opera, either male or female? You're listening to your colleague and thinking, what a great tune. I wish I got to sing that.
Well, within the confines of Così, I desperately want to play the role of Don Alfonso at some point in my career, which of course is like the old man bass baritone. So maybe if I follow Maestro Domingo's track and I someday start singing baritone roles, I'd like to start with that one. They all get stuck in my head all the time. I got to say the one I never want to sing is basically any Mozart soprano role, because they're just
I would agree with you on that one.
It's kind of more of like composers that I wish had written opera or more opera. I wish, Mozart had lived to be 70. I wish John Williams would write an opera, that would be great.
Well, I wish we could go on with these questions, but unfortunately we need to wrap things up. It sure has been a lot of fun. Before I turn things back over to Mary Jo Heath in the radio booth, I want to thank you for joining me. And Toy 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 for Così fan tutte, Serena Malfi, Ben Bliss, and Adam Placetta.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. That was Deborah Voigt and Liz Tall with our Singers Roundtable. We're all looking forward to this production of Così fan tutte, which opens on March the 15th. It also stars, by the way, Amanda Majeski as Fiordiligi, Christopher Maltman as Don Alfonso, and Kelly O'Hara as Despina, all conducted by David Robertson. It is set in Coney Island in the 1950s.
I love that idea. Così is my favorite opera, was my favorite opera to direct when I was directing opera. Coney Island was my favorite place to go when I was a kid, so I think the combination for me is just going to be wonderful.
Well, there you go, Ira. A dream come true. Coming up soon, Act 2 of Puccini's Madama Butterfly.
Here are just a few of the different ways Puccini used the Star-Spangled Banner in Madama Butterfly. The tune was actually written by a British composer, but that opening phrase with the rising arpeggio and the emphatic dotted rhythm perfectly suits the character of the American naval officer, Pinkerton. Often, Puccini just quotes that whole phrase outright. Other times, he uses elements of it in meaningful ways. Let's hear just the arpeggio played on a keyboard. And here's a different motif, the one that introduced Cho-Cho-san in Act 1. If we combine these two, we might get this. It's what bursts out of the orchestra when Cho-Cho-san reveals the child of her union with Pinkerton. Finally, we can also hear an echo of the Star-Spangled Banner in a despairing minor key, lurking in Butterfly's death aria. In the hands of Puccini, the melody which sounded so bright and optimistic at the beginning of the opera now underpins the tragedy of Madama Butterfly. For the Met, I'm Ellen Keel.
We are live at the Met. I'm Mary Jo Heath. I'm with our commentator Ira Sif, and Act 2 of Puccini's Madama Butterfly will begin in a few minutes. Ira, let's talk through the story and music. 3 years have passed since Butterfly and Pinkerton's wedding. 3 years in which Pinkerton has been gone and Butterfly has been waiting for him to return. Her loyal maid Suzuki is afraid they're destitute, and she believes Pinkerton may have abandoned Butterfly. But Butterfly urges her to have faith and describes the beautiful day he'll come back, un bel dì.
Well, this aria draws you into the heartbreakingly detailed vision Butterfly has created. The famous opening melody is so full of hope. And each little melodic section in the aria describes a phase of Pinkerton's return.
The ship entering the harbor, how he'll walk up the hill, what he'll say to her.
It builds to a fervent return of the opening tune as she talks about trying not to die from joy.
And she promises Suzuki all of this will happen.
Yes, her voice soars to a high B flat as she declares, "With secure faith, I await him." How much of this is for Suzuki's benefit? How much is Butterfly trying to convince herself? We don't know.
No, she never shows us any doubt. Then, to her surprise, the American consul, Sharpless, pays her a visit. While he's there, the marriage broker Goro arrives with a new prospective husband for Butterfly, the rich prince Yamadori. But she sends the prince away, insisting that she's already married. Once Sharpless is alone with her again, he shows her a letter he's received from Pinkerton.
And this duet is so painful. There's a gentle motif underscoring it as Sharpless keeps trying to read the letter to her little by little while she keeps interrupting.
Sharpless's exasperation is more with Pinkerton in the position he's put him in than with Butterfly. Finally, he asks her a blunt question. What would she do if Pinkerton were never to return to her?
And in the orchestra, we hear a brutal thud of a chord followed by broken-sounding figures on the woodwinds. On low, lifeless notes, Butterfly says she could return to being a geisha or, better, die.
Sharpless presses on, telling her she really should accept Prince Yamadori's offer. She's devastated that he would say this to her. And suddenly, she runs from the room. To Sharpless's astonishment, she returns with a little boy, Pinkerton's son. She tells Sharpless to write to Pinkerton about the child. She has an aria here. She's addressing the boy, but her words are really aimed at Sharpless.
In this heartbreaking aria, she presents a grotesque image of herself singing and dancing for people, begging for her child's food and clothing. A haunting Asian-sounding theme joins her vocal line, and at the end of the aria, when Butterfly says she'd rather end her life, that theme explodes in the orchestra.
Sharpless, stunned and shaken, promises to tell Pinkerton about the boy and leaves. But Goro, who's been eavesdropping, warns her that the child will be an outcast in America. Butterfly turns on him in fury and throws him out of the house. Everything seems to be telling her to give up hope, when all of a sudden, a cannon shot is heard, signaling that a ship has entered the port.
Over the theme from her aria, Butterfly describes what she sees through her spyglass. The music gains strength as she becomes certain it's Pinkerton's ship. The Star-Spangled Banner finds its way into her vocal line as she cries out, "He's returning and he loves me."
Yeah, beside herself with joy and relief, she and Suzuki decorate the house with flowers. This is the euphoric flower duet. Then she readies herself for Pinkerton's arrival, even getting dressed in her wedding finery. Finally, Butterfly, her little boy, and Suzuki settle down for the vigil. That's when we hear the exquisite humming chorus that takes over as the act ends.
The melody's hummed by the offstage chorus over delicate pizzicato strings. It's the motif we heard earlier when Sharpless was trying to read Pinkerton's letter to Butterfly, but here it becomes a wordless evocation of waiting.
Yeah, it's a striking end to this act, which was so full of emotional upheaval in such a quiet way.
You know, the emotional roller coaster experienced by Butterfly in this act demands something extraordinary of the singer portraying her. Her music reflects all these shifts: denial, grief, anger, ebullience, triumph, and now quiet joy, patient waiting. It's really a tour de force.
Yeah, it really is. This is the big act for every singer that sings this role. This is the one where they get to show everything, isn't it?
To balance for themselves the real emotion they're feeling with the ability to sing the
Right.
music.
We will hear in order of appearance Maria Zivchek as Suzuki, Ermanella Yaho as Cho-Cho-san, Madama Butterfly, Tony Stevenson is Goro, Roberto Frontali is Sharpless, and Hyung Jung is Prince Yamadori, and Marco Armiliato conducts. Now, in this production, Butterfly's child is represented by a Bunraku-style puppet. He's handled by 3 practically invisible puppeteers. They're all dressed in black. And they are able to make his actions and reactions so expressive and natural. You get the feeling that this is exactly how a little 3 or 4-year-old child would really respond in this situation. Getting distracted, picking up the flowers, doing this, doing that, not paying attention to his mother.
There's a real warmth and humanity they convey through this puppet. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it really is. And once again, at the opening of this act, there's going to be a very brief pantomime this time, which I will describe as it takes place. Marco Armiliato is getting ready to enter the orchestra pit. Audience is getting settled down. Here comes our maestro now. And here he is, asking the orchestra to rise. Applauding for them himself and shaking hands with Laura Hamilton as we get ready for Act 2 of Puccini's Madama Butterfly, which will start very shortly. Now, as we open this act, Cho-Cho-san is in her home, which is delineated by Japanese screens, a table, and some chairs. Pinkerton walks in and sits down, and she's going to walk over to serve him, and a screen will pass in front of them, and suddenly Pinkerton is gone.
Credo pesi sogni dei giapponesi. L'americano in Dio son persuasa che più presto risponde a chi l'implori, a te va che l'ignori, che noi siamo qui di casa. Suzuki e lungi la miseria. Questo è l'ultimo affondo. Questo ho troppe spese. sua sposa che son io. Tornato al suo nido. T'uccido. Quell'ultima mattina tornerete, signor di Madama. carpina, i nomi che mi dava il suo venire. Tutto questo avverrà, te lo prometto.
Chiedo scusa, Madama Butterfly.
Madama Pinkerton, prego. Il mio signor console, signor console.
Mi ravvisate?
Benvenuta in casa americana.
Grazie.
Tutti bene,
Ma spero.
fumate.
Grazie. Ho qui.
Signore, io voglio azzurro.
Grazie.
Preferite forse le sigarette americane?
Grazie. Ho da mostrarvi. Mi scrisse Benjamin Franklin Pinkerton.
In salute.
Perfetta.
Io sono la donna più lieta del Giappone. Potrei farvi una domanda.
Certo.
Quando fanno i loro nido in America, i petti rossi?
Come dite?
Sì, prima dopo di qui.
Ma perché?
Mio marito m'ha promesso di ritornar nella stagione beata, che il pettirosso rifà la nidiata. Quella rifatta per me 3 volte può darsi che di là usi l'idione spesso, che vede o c'è l'accodo un uom cattivo.
Godo!
Zitto! Egnoso, no, prima risponditi alla dimanda mia.
Mi rincresce, ma ignoro. Non ho studiato ornitologia.
Ornitologia?
Non
Non lo sapete, insomma.
dicevamo.
Ah sì, goro appena mi ficchetò, fu il mare mi venne ad assediare con ciarre e con presenti per ridarmi ora questo orme marito. Or prometti tesori però lasci moneta.
Il ricco gli amatori e la povera in canna, i suoi parenti l'han tutti rinnegata. Servi oro, aro muro, un palazzo principesco.
Già legata è la mia fede.
Carità ancor si crede.
Non ne credo, sono.
Ma la legge
io non la so.
E la moglie l'abbandono al divorzio equiparo.
La Ricci giapponese non già del mio paese.
Quale?
Gli Stati Uniti.
Oh, l'infelice.
Si sa che aprir la porta e la moglie cacciar per la più corta. Qui divorziar si dice. In America questo non si può. Vero?
Però
là un bravo giudice serio impettito dice al marito: lei vuol andarsene, senta perché? Sono siccato del coniugato e il magistrato mascalzone, presto e pregione, son zucchi
una trista, una si piena cecità, segnalata è già le navi di Pinkerton. Quando esso lo rifreda, egli non vuol mostrarsi, io venni appunto per levarla d'inganno.
persone moleste.
Addio. Vi lascio il cuor pien di cordoglio, ma spero ancora.
Padroni.
ne voleste.
Il guaglio è che non voglio.
Ora noi sedete qui, legger con me, volete questa lettera?
Dati sulla bocca, sul cuore, siete l'uomo migliore del mondo. Incominciate.
Amico, cercherete quel bel fior di fanciulla.
Dice proprio così?
Sì, così dice. Ma se ad ogni momento
Taccio, più nulla.
da quel tempo felice 3 anni son passati
Anche lui li ha contati.
e forse Butterfly non mi rammenta più.
Non lo rammento, Suzuki dell'otto. Non mi rammenta più.
Pazienza. Se mi vuol bene ancora, se m'aspetta,
Tu benedetta.
a voi mi raccomando, perché vogliate con circospezione prepararla.
Ritorno!
A colpo.
Quando? Presto!
Benone. Qui troncarla conviene, quel diavolo d'un Pinkerton. Ebbene, che fareste, Madama Butterfly, se non dovesse ritornar più mai?
Due cose potrei fare: tornare a divertir la gente col cantar, oppure meglio morire.
Di strapparvi, sai, mi costa, dai miraggi ingannatori, accogliete la proposta di quel ricco Yamadori.
si fa?
Questo che? Presto, presto! Che sua grazia se ne va!
Mi scacciate!
Ve ne prego, che se non fare!
Voi brutale non lo nego!
Oh, mi fate tanto male, tanto. Niente. Ho creduto morir, ma passa presto come passano le nuvole sul mare. Ah, ma scordata! Egli potrà pure scordare.
Egli è suo!
Vide mai a bimbo del Giappone occhi azzurrini, il labbro, i ricciolini d'oro schietto.
È palese! E Pinkerton lo sa!
No, no, quant'egli stava in quel sacro paese. Ma voi gli scriverete che aspetta un figlio senza pari. E voi saprete dir che non saprete per le terre che vuole. Sai cos'ebbe cuore di pensare quel signore? Che tua madre dovrà prenderti in braccio e dalla pioggia e al vento andar per la città a guadagnarti il pane, il vestimento e dalle impietosite genti la man tremante stenderà. Gridando, udite, udite, la triste mancanza a un'infelice madre la carità. Muovetevi a pieto. I butterfly, orribile destino, danzerà per te. E come fece già la griscia canterà.
io scendo al piano, mi perdonate. I bei capelli biondi, caro, come ti chiamano?
Rispondi, oggi il mio nome è dolore. Però dite al babbo scrivendogli il giorno del
Tuo padre lo saprà, te lo prometto.
Ci non c'è giorno, il vampiro, ed ogni giorno ai quattro venti spargendo va. Chi non lo sa chi padrone ma sia.
Solo che là in America, quando un figliuolo è nato maledetto, vorrà sempre lieto la vita fra le genti.
Addirittura tu cielo! Oddio! Vedrai piccolo mio bene il mio conforto, mio piccolo vedrai che tu mi peccato, ci porterò lontano nella sua terra, lontan ci porterò. Il cannone del porto. Con la nave da guerra. Bianca, bianca, il vessello americano delle stelle. Il governo per ancorare. Reggimi la mano ch'io ne discerna il nome. Il nome. Il nome. Eccolo. Ecco. trionfa il mio amor, il mio amor, la mia vita trionfa intera. Scuoti quella fronda di ciliegio e minuta di fior. Io voto farne la pioggia dolorosa all'arsa fronte. Signora, quentatevi quel pianto. Rido, quanto lo dovremo aspettare. Che pensi? Un'ora di più, 2 ore forse, tutto sapente io come la notte ti fa ville. Vapi fior, tutti fior, tutti che scoppiò la gelsame. Quando decès moderno l'albero fiore, l'inverno sarà tutto il giardin. La primavera con gli occhializzi, uno spallor d'inverno sarà tutto il giardin. A voi, signora, ogni ancora. Sovoti a questa siepe, venisse a riguardare, lungi piangendo nella deserta immensità. Adesso l'attesa nulla più chiede al mare, diede pianto alla zolla e sai suoi fior mi dà. Spoglio l'orto, il aiuto, sia il porco della soglia, tutta la primavera, zicchi, Carminio, ed anche a te piccino, perché la veglia non ti faccia bate per pallore le note. Non vi muovete che vuoi ravviare i capelli. Che ne diranno e l'ozio bonzo già del mio danno tutti contenti. Io adori coi suoi languori, beffati scornati, beffati spennati l'ingrati. E fatto
After years of waiting for Pinkerton's return, Butterfly prepares to wait for just one more night. That was Act 2 of Puccini's Madama Butterfly, coming to you live from the Metropolitan Opera House in New York City. We heard Ermanella Yaho as Cho-Cho-san, Maria Zivchak as Suzuki, and Roberto Frontali as Sharpless, with Marco Armiliato conducting. Ira, that humming chorus.
That entire act, what a powerful thing. You know, I remember when I was a kid seeing this at the Old Met many times. I was so wiped out by Act 2 emotionally, I would have to go across 39th Street to the coffee shop across the street and have a coffee milkshake to fortify myself to be able to get through Act 3. And now as an adult, I think about what the singer goes through during Act 2.
Yeah. Oh, a coffee milkshake. What a nice memory of old days. And you were in standing room, you said.
Standing room, yes. That's part of the fortification necessity.
I see. Coffee milkshakes during the second intermission. We should bring those back, I think. I'm Mary Jo Heath. Commentator Ira Siff is with me. In a few minutes, we're going to go backstage to speak with our Butterfly in Pinkerton. And we'll hear from soprano Christine Goerke, who just opened here in the title role of Strauss's Elektra. After intermission, of course, the conclusion of Madama Butterfly. Stay with us.
Well, we'll leave the Met and their coffee milkshakes there, but only for a couple of minutes while they enjoy an ad break. It does give me time, though, to let you know about tomorrow's jazz-infused Sunday feature.
That's the first time I can remember a British jazz photographer getting an exhibition in an institution like the V&A. Extraordinary recognition of her importance.
Val Wilmer is a photographer, writer and historian with a passion for jazz and African-American culture.
When people like Louis Armstrong started playing, it changed the way that brass was played in symphony orchestras.
She has spent her life challenging preconceptions.
What's this little girl want? Beverly Sisters or something? I said, we've got new jazz records.
A portrait of Val Wilmer, tomorrow night at 6:45 on BBC Radio 3.
This is Opera on 3 on BBC Radio 3, and we'll be rejoining the Met very shortly. Now, while the Met season's been going on, Radio 3's been out recording performances from the British opera houses. Next Saturday, we're at the Royal Opera House for a real favourite, Bizet's Carmen. It's a new production from Barry Kosky, which shines a new light on the opera, as well as reintroducing parts of the score which aren't normally heard in performance. It stars Anna Goriachova and Francesco Melli as the doomed lovers, Carmen and Don José. John Martin Handley with guest Sarah Hibbard for that next Saturday at the usual time of 6:30. And you can find full details of that, along with the upcoming Met performances, as always, on the Radio 3 website. Well, still to come before the second section of Act 2, interviews with tonight's Butterfly and Pinkerton, Ermanella Yaho and Roberto Aranaka, and also soprano Christine Goerke, who sings Elektra at the Met in a couple of weeks' time. So without further ado, let's return to New York.
Here's a preview of next Saturday's matinee broadcast, live from the stage of the Metropolitan Opera. Rossini's Semiramide, a grand bel canto treasure about ambition and retribution in ancient Babylon. Angela Meade stars as the legendary queen Semiramide, a powerful ruler with a guilty past. Elizabeth Deschamps is Arsace, the young warrior caught in romantic, political, and family intrigue. Ildar Abdratsakov is the scheming Asur, who knows the queen's dark secrets. And Javier Camarena is Idreno, a foreign king on a quest for love. Maurizio Benini conducts the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra and Chorus. Semiramide by Rossini, live from the Met, next Saturday's broadcast. We are live at the Metropolitan Opera for Puccini's Madama Butterfly. It's our second intermission now, and let's go backstage to Lauren Tulajian, who's speaking with Ermanella Yaho and Roberto Aronica.
Thank you very much, Mary Jo. And I have to say, we're all on the verge of tears back here, just about. It is so beautiful and so touching. Chocho-san and Pinkerton and this opera, Ermanella Yaho and Roberto Aronica, thank you for a few moments. I get why you're so moved by it. What is it about Puccini's music that touches us so deeply and immediately?
Puccini is great, actually. The music written by Puccini goes straight to your heart. So, and it's like a punch always. You know, he starts with certain things. You know, just to make you feeling, to go in another world. You know, having fun. And the right moment is the punch. It's like it goes straight to your heart. It's something really strong. I've sang this role many times, but every time it's like my first one, and that's why now I don't have words, only some tears in my in my eyes. So, it goes straight to your heart.
Roberto, does that much emotion make it easier or more challenging to sing for you?
It's more challenging, especially when you sing with an artist like Ermanella, that she put the heart on stage, and it's difficult to don't cry and stay there to sing and thinking the breath, the position, because it takes very emotion. It's a big emotion to sing with her.
Ermanella, we've seen just how firmly Butterfly believes in Pinkerton. So is that faith, is it a strength or is it a weakness? Or maybe a bit of both?
Strength and faith. Because, in her mind she's secure, and she has in her world, she knows he's coming back, and even if it's that hope that no one can see, but doesn't mean that doesn't exist for her. So she has faith and hope at the same time, and I think it's so strong. It's a strength, as I can say, not a weakness. Absolutely. Now we cry because we see this young girl with so much hope. He's struggling. She's a tormented soul, but with so much hope. That's why everyone, is getting so moving, That's why.
Yeah. Your love duet at the end of Act One is simply breathtaking. At that moment, Roberto, how true is Pinkerton's love for Butterfly? Does he believe it?
Yes, I think in that moment he believes, and she's so young, she's beautiful. But in other way, it's like a contract with the Goro. So
right.
That's why I make him bad. He's a bad guy, but he's young too. He thinks life is like that in Japan. It's in a new world. So it's a kind of bad guy, but not so bad.
In just our last minute, we all know how this story ends. So during intermission, how do you prepare for what's to come? Aside from talking with me, of course.
But, I think it's very, very important not to think about the end, because you don't have to give it immediately,
Mm-hmm.
So it's in my mind is that she's hoping. So I have to be really strong, really to say to myself, no, he's coming back. You are going to see Pinkerton, because you need that raw emotion. If you prepare that, the public is going to feel it. So.
Yeah, the same thing. I mean, the third act is difficult because you have to go back like a coward.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it difficult? That's why Puccini stopped the line of the tenor on the trio. That was, I think, better for the the character. He goes because he can't, and after he came back. But there is the aria to make him more nice, if we want to say.
But she was right, because he came back. So. She was right.
Yeah,
she
right.
saw that. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, being back here with both of you on this day, in this performance, watching the emotion on your face, Ermanella, and Roberto speaking with you, this is why we love opera. This is why you do what you do. This is why we're all of us, so grateful and blessed to be here. So, thank you for a few minutes. Thank you for talking with me. Ermanella Yaho and Roberto Aronica. I'm Lauren Tulajian. We are live backstage at the Met. Mary Jo and Ira. Back to you in the radio booth.
Thanks, Lauren. Boy, you could really hear the emotion in all three of them there in that interview, couldn't you?
Indeed.
And she said she's done this role so many times, and it's probably that's what it takes in this role, is to stay in the moment, present in the moment on stage. Don't think about what's coming. It'll just happen.
Yep.
We're listening to Madame Butterfly by Giacomo Puccini with a libretto by Giuseppe Giacosa and Luigi Illica, based on the play by David Belasco. This production is by Anthony Minghella. The direction and choreography are by Carolyn Choi. Sets are by Michael Levine. Costumes are by Han Feng. Lighting is by Peter Munford. And the puppetry is by Blind Summit Theater. The revival stage direction is by Paula Williams. The production was a gift of Mercedes and Sid Bass. Madama Butterfly is a co-production of the Metropolitan Opera, English National Opera, and the Lithuanian National Opera. The chorus master is Donald Palumbo. Musical preparation is by Howard Watkins, J. David Jackson, Carol Isaac, and Jonathan C. Kelly. The assistant stage director is Sarah Erdy. The Italian coach is Hemdi Kafir. The stage manager is Margot Mayer-Mowell, and the prompter is Carol Isaac. Well, Ira, it may have been almost 2 days ago, but I am still reeling from Strauss's Elektra, which opened here on Thursday night. What an intense, thrilling ride it was.
Yeah,
Goodness.
isn't it amazing what that opera can do to you in under 2 hours?
Yeah, really incredible. It really is. And the roar that went up from the audience at the end of the performance, it just took my breath away. They went wild for everyone, but especially for our maestro and future music director, Yannick Nézet-Séguin, and for soprano Christine Goerke in the title role.
Yeah, she's won tremendous acclaim for this role, which is one of the most notoriously daunting there is.
Right. Well, the character of Elektra is drawn from Greek mythology. She's the princess whose father Agamemnon was murdered by her mother Clytemnestra. Elektra and her siblings, her sister Chrysotomus and her brother Oreste, have lived this trauma for years. Elektra fueled primarily by her desire for revenge. I spoke with Goerke recently, and she told me that the Met's production by Patrice Chéreau presents a surprising picture of this blood-soaked family.
The relationships between the characters are far more normal than I am used to. There's a more conversational aspect to things. There's a very big concentration on the mother-daughter relationship, on the sister relationship, and far less of a Greek tragic way, but more of a, this is the kind of banter that you would have with your sister. This is the kind of relationship you have with your mother. It's love-hate all the time. And there's a lot of understanding on both sides in this particular production. And I'm finding that really fascinating.
You've called Elektra the sanest one in the piece. Really?
Well, a lot of the other characters in this piece try to forget what has happened, to adjust the past, to ignore the past. And there has been no closure. And she is slightly obsessed, I will give you that, but she also is very clear about what has happened. And though it's been a decade or more, what needs to happen in order to have the closure. And so without that closure, she feels that nothing else should be happening until the vengeance has come to pass.
Mm-hmm. How do your scenes or duets with Chrysotomus and Clytemnestra show different sides of her?
Yeah, musically, there are very lyric moments and there are very sort of angular moments.
Mm-hmm.
And it lines up so much with the text. There are bombastic moments in the orchestra, and then there are very tender moments in the orchestra. I think people sometimes view both Wagner and Strauss as the kind of Spinal Tap, turn it up to 11 all the time. And there's definitely that, and it is crazy cool. However, there are moments where with both of these composers, you can just whisper. And the orchestration reflects this as well. Just when you sort of have settled into something lovely, the orchestration will move along to something else. It's very clear when those schisms happen.
So, what do you find to be the main vocal challenge of singing this opera?
It's about stamina and pacing. The thing that is remarkable about this opera, she's possibly my favorite character. There's so much to pull out dramatically. You have to find this line where you can go right up to it and the vocalism doesn't suffer. And if you go over it dramatically, physically, then the vocalism begins to suffer. The trick is for me writing that line the entire evening. I know where the big moments are, and I know where the quote-unquote rest moments are.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't take care to observe those rest moments, I can exhaust myself.
Are you surprised at all that Electra has sort of become a signature role for you?
Yep.
Why?
Honestly, Chrysotomus was my first quote-unquote big girl role, and I was in love with the opera from the moment I started to study it. You know, I was very happy singing Chrysotomus, and I had done 3 runs of that, and I had sung it the first time, and people said, great. From the second contract, people were already asking me to switch roles. And I said, no, I'm not ready to do this yet. I'm not ready to do this yet. This is a terrifying role. And, you know, no matter how many people say, this is for you, what if they're wrong? And I break it. I don't want to break it. I love this music too much. I want to do service to the music, and I also would like to, you know, still be singing in 10 years. And so I wrote to Deborah Pulaski. She was my first Electra. And I said, right, you are sort of my hero here, and you sing this with your voice, and it is so smartly done and so exciting. I feel maybe it's too soon. Maybe I'm not old enough. And she said something amazing to me. She said that people have to stop worrying about numbers. If this is what your voice does, this is what your voice does. If your technique can support it, then that's what you do. And what I learned was that, in fact, there is no one way to sing this role. And you cannot try to do what someone else does, because you will fail. Every person has to find their way through this role. And when I found my way through, it felt like home, which is either really exciting or terrifying. But vocally, it felt like home. And so I am actually really thrilled that it has become a signature role.
Well, now let's dial forward to next season. We are thrilled that you're going to sing Brunhilde in your first complete ring cycle in one season.
It seemed reasonable to do it here. I mean,
well,
you know.
Why not? So how does that feel to have that on your calendar for next season?
I'm so excited. It means everything to me. My first Wagner role was Third Norn, and it was here, and I remember distinctly standing on the side of the stage just staring at Jane Eaglin and this amazing prologue happening in Götterdämmerung, and I thought, oh my God, please, just once. Even if I bust up my chords, I don't care. If I could do it just once. And so to have the opportunity to actually come home and be able and have the honor to do this on this stage where, you know, so many great Brunhildes have stood. I am overjoyed. I cannot wait.
Well, we can't wait either for next season in the Ring Cycle, starring soprano Christine Goerke, who we just heard from. She's currently starring in Richard Strauss's Electra here at the Met alongside Elsa Vandenhaver and Michaela Schuster, all under the baton of our music director designate Yannick Nazé-Sagan.
Electra is always an event, something terribly exciting. You know, I was listening to Christine talking about the balance between the emotional and the stamina issue in that role. Butterfly is kind of an Italian Electra in that sense. When she starts, she's on, and it's essential for the soprano. They all talk about it, balancing the emotional with the vocal in that role, and also the intimacy in the Chirot production of Electra. Butterfly has an intimacy, too, that you can tap on, coast, rest for a little while, save for the big moments.
Right. Well, Electra will be our broadcast 2 weeks from today on March the 17th.
And the good news is that Radio 3 will be joining the Met for that performance. Once again, we'll leave New York there for a moment for their ad break. Just a reminder that as well as the regular Saturday evening slot, you can also hear opera in afternoon concerts Thursday Opera Matinee. Next week, Judith Weir, Master of the Queen's Music, is Kate Mollison's live guest in the afternoon concert studio for International Women's Day to introduce a performance of her opera The Vanishing Bridegroom. And it's complemented by music she loves by woman composers from Hildegard to Sariaho. That's next Thursday at 2 o'clock. As always, full details of that and all the upcoming operas are on the Radio 3 website. Well, now, looking at the clock, almost 9:15, time to head back to New York for the conclusion of Madame Butterfly.
I'm Mary Jo Heath. Commentator Ira Siff is here with me. We're live at the Metropolitan Opera, and we're coming up on the conclusion of Puccini's Madama Butterfly. Butterfly, Suzuki, and the child have waited all night for Pinkerton, And we'll hear an intermezzo as this act begins that seems to suggest Butterfly's emotional turmoil.
Well, it begins with harmonies and melodies drawn from Japanese kabuki dance music. The mood is somber at first, evoking the exhaustion of the long wait, but then it builds into a passionate statement of the love theme before fading into the sound of sailors' voices in the distance.
Yeah, it's daybreak here in Nagasaki Harbor. The birds begin chirping, the city starts to bustle, yet Pinkerton has not appeared yet. Butterfly takes her son inside to get some rest.
And she puts him to bed with a brief, haunting lullaby one feels she's sung to him many times. She sings, "You are with God, I with my sorrow."
Suzuki is still up when 3 Americans arrive: Sharpless, Pinkerton, and a woman. When Suzuki realizes that this woman, Kate, is Pinkerton's wife, she knows all hope is lost for Butterfly. There's a devastating trio here as Sharpless begs Suzuki for her help in breaking the news to Butterfly and in convincing her to give the child to Pinkerton and Kate to raise. Pinkerton is overwhelmed by the realization that Butterfly has been waiting for him faithfully for these 3 years.
The trio is followed by an aria for Pinkerton, and it's full of remorse with none of the flippancy and arrogance we witnessed in Act 1. The emotion in the melody is genuine, but it does not fully redeem this character because he's still too much of a coward to face Butterfly.
Yes, unable to bear his guilt, he rushes off, so that when Butterfly wakes up and runs into the garden, she sees only Kate and Sharpless with Suzuki. She asks fearfully, "What does this woman want from me?" And then she grasps the truth, that Kate is Pinkerton's wife, and they want to take her son from her. Sharpless urges her to consider the boy's well-being, and Butterfly, beyond despair, consents.
She summons the remarkable strength we've witnessed from her as she wishes Kate well, but demands that Pinkerton himself come for the child. The melody briefly recalls Butterfly's earlier happy vision of Pinkerton's return, but this time with an ominous tone.
Once the others have left, Butterfly orders Suzuki away.
We hear the pounding of drums with a ritual feel. Then the suicide theme makes clear what she's about to do.
Yet resolutely, she opens a box containing the dagger that belonged to her father. And she reads the inscription, "To die with honor if one cannot maintain life with honor." But Suzuki, trying to stop her, sends the little boy running in. And now Butterfly's grief comes pouring out in an anguished farewell to him.
And this aria begins with broken, desperate phrases of love for her child. They grow into long, agonized lines as she pleads with him never to feel abandoned by her and to look at her carefully so he might remember a trace of his mother's face.
"Farewell, my little love," she says. Gently, she blindfolds him so he won't be able to see what she's about to do. And then she sends him off to play. Soon, Pinkerton comes running up the hill.
He calls out her name, a tragic distortion of the way she dreamed he would.
And he rushes in only to find her lifeless.
And the orchestra thunders out Butterfly's death theme, ending on a shattering, dissonant chord.
Just like that, and it ends. Oh, this opera. Yes, don't think ahead in the third act, just sort of let it unfold. It gets us every time, doesn't it?
Well, sometimes, you know, we were talking about this, I feel like sometimes the happy music is more difficult to listen to than the tragic music in this opera because of that.
You're right, because you know it's coming. It might be happy for a moment, but just wait.
Yep.
We will hear in order of appearance Maria Zivchak as Suzuki, Erminella Yaho as Cho-Cho-san, Roberto Frontali as Sharpless, Roberta Oranica as Pinkerton, and Edita Kulchak as Pinkerton's wife, Kate. And in just a moment, Marco Armiliato will be on the podium as we're coming up on the Act 2, Part 2, as it's called, of Puccini's Madama Butterfly, or the conclusion, if you want to call it that way. There's Maestro Armiliato on the podium asking the orchestra to rise. Going to shake hands with Laura Hamilton. Let's hear Act 2, Part 2 of Puccini's Madama Butterfly.
zitta, non la destar.
Era stanca sì tanto di sterti ad aspettare tutta la notte col bimbo.
Come sapea?
Non giunge da 3 anni una nave nel porto che da lunge butterfly. Non struti il color la bandiera.
Ve lo dissi.
La chiamo.
No, non ancor.
Lo vedete? Ier sera la stanza vuole sfagge di fiori.
Ve lo dissi. Che pena.
Chi ce l'ha fuori nel giardino? Una donna.
Zitta!
Chi è?
Vedi cosa?
Chi è?
È venuta con me.
Chi è?
È sua moglie.
I santi degli uovi. Alla piccina si è spento il sol. Si è spento il sol.
Scegliemmo quest'ora mattutina per ritrovarti sola su Zucchi e alla gran prova un aiuto, un sostegno cercar con te.
Che giova, che giova.
Io so che alle sue pene non ci sono conforti, ma del bimbo conviene assicurar le sorti. La fragranza di questi fiori entrar non osa alternatura del bimbo Non ve l'avevo detto, datele voi qualche soccorso, mi struggo dal rimorso, mi struggo dal rimorso. Quel dissi mi ricorda quando la man vi diede, badate, ella ci crede, e fui profeta allor. Sorda ai consigli, sorda ai
pensiero da sola prenderò. Addio, fiorito asil, letizia ed amor, sempre il vite suo sembiante, con strazio atroce vedrò. Ma or quel cor sincero presago fiori bellissimi vi ricorda e fui profeta allor squallor non reggo al tuo squallor.
Glielo dirai. Prometto. Le darai consiglio da fidarmi. Prometto terrò un figlio. Vi credo, ma bisogna che le sia sola accanto. Nella grande ora sola. Piangerò piangerò tanto. Sotapi, dove sei? Sotapi, son qui. Pregavo e non avevo posto. No, non so dove nascosto? Ecco il console. E dove? Non c'è. Quella donna che vuol da me ma non viene più, te l'han detto. Vespa, voglio che tu risponda! Mai più, mai giunto ieri. Sì. Oh, quella donna mi fa tanta paura, tanta paura.
È la causa innocente d'ogni vostra sciagura. Perdonate.
Sua moglie. Tutto è morto per me, tutto è finito.
Coraggio.
Voglio prendermi tutto. Il figlio mio.
Fatelo per suo bene il sacrificio.
Oh, triste madre, triste madre, abbandonare mio figlio. A lui devo obbedire. Potete perdonarmi, Pater Flas, sotto il gran potere del cielo non vedrò nati voi più felici. Siate sempre, non attristate per me. Povera piccina,
È un'immensa pietà.
il figlio lo darà. A lui non potrò dare se non verrà cercare. Fra mezz'ora il bimbo vestio gioca, lo chiamo, lascialo giocare, va a fargli compagnia, resto con voi, te lo comando, va! Che